Welcome to the Tea Time Podcast, where it's all about taking a few healthy minutes each day just for you, with your host, Sharissa Bradley.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Tea Time Podcast. I'm Sharissa Bradley, and I'm so happy to have you back. Welcome. Today I want to talk about holistic health. Have you ever heard this word before? It's kind of a buzzword now. It used to just be like health. You know, this is the original way things were done. So people would just say like, hey, here comes the medicine man. And now it's like we have to put this whole other spin on it because it's so rare to think of the body this way now. It is seeming to move more into the trend. So now more and more people are talking about it. More and more people are understanding that you can't break the body up into a million pieces and then kind of hope that you're getting the right thing because you're treating one thing at a time. The body really works together, all together. So if we're having a problem, there's likely a cause of that problem, and that cause of a problem likely didn't stem from where it is that you're treating from. So it's important to see the body as a whole and really look at the whole picture and see us all together. So I recently finished writing a book. I'm very excited about this book. I cannot even believe it. It was a dream of mine my entire life, and it is now in the beta phase, or actually coming out of the beta phase now. So what that means is that a couple of my close friends read the book for me and gave me some advice and told me the things that maybe could be adjusted or could be added. And then after I made those adjustments, it goes to a professional editor who's going to hopefully make it a decent enough book that most people will want to read it. And I'm really excited about that. This is a huge step for me and a huge it was an amazing process and an amazing journey for me. And I want through this podcast kind of share some of those ideas that were in the book so that you can kind of get an understanding of where I'm coming from. And one of the kind of general concepts that I want you to take from the book and from the podcast and any other way that you ever talk to me, whether it's in person or through Facebook or through one of my groups, I want you to know that I really believe that the whole body works together. So what this means is when we are dealing with some kind of a pain or some kind of a problem or some kind of an ailment or disease, like maybe you recently got a diagnosis of something, and then we automatically want to start treating whatever it is in that area that seems to be having a problem. So let me make this a little bit more concrete for you. Say you are dealing with headaches or migraines, for instance, and it's something that you regularly struggle with. And this is something that hits home for me because my mom had migraines most of my life. She dealt with migraines, and it would come on out of nowhere, seemingly without any pattern, or having been triggered from something like perfume or paint or some kind of nail polish, things like that. We would walk by stores and without really knowing, and she would get hit with some kind of smell from somewhere, and that was it. She'd be taken down for like a week, and it often ended up that we would be in the hospital. She would have to get morphine. It was kind of a traumatic experience considering that was really young for me in my childhood to have to be kind of constantly witnessing this. So migraines are something that I have a personal spot for in my heart for people who deal with and cope with migraines on a regular basis, because I witnessed what it was like as a kid watching somebody go through that horrible pain. And then I myself have suffered from migraines, not nearly to that capacity and not nearly that often. But it's something that is it's pretty prevalent now, and a lot of people are dealing with it, so much so that we're seeing commercial advertisements for migraine support, and if there wasn't an audience for it, we wouldn't see those kind of big nationwide commercials. So I want to talk about kind of where that would come from and why it's important to see the body as a whole. So immediately when we have pain in an area, we want to treat that area. So if you're having migraines, likely you are going to either a neurologist or some type of pain specialist, or you're talking to your doctor specifically about pain medication for that area in your body. Well, the unique thing about migraines is that they're actually caused by inflammation in the brain. So there's some type of inflammation that's going on that's creating this like really horrible, painful situation. And sometimes for people, even nausea, vomiting, and loss of some vision, tunnel vision, and aura vision, where they see that light around their visual area. So there's a lot of things that can actually be the cause of migraines, not just the triggers that are involved. So maybe it's hormonally triggered, or maybe it's triggered by smells. That's just more clues to get to the bottom of what the problem is. If there's inflammation in the brain, it means that there's something crossing over into the brain to create that inflammation. That's actually a much bigger problem, because we have something protecting our brain called the blood-brain barrier. And it's literally a barrier at the base of our cerebellum, the bottom of your brain, that blocks any large particles or foreign things from coming into the brain. It develops around the age of 2. So before we're 2 years old, we don't have a fully formed blood-brain barrier yet, and it starts to develop, and it seems to be fully developed by the time we're 2 years old. And that barrier blocks all of these things from getting in. So it should essentially, in a healthy person, block any inflammatory responses in the brain, or block anything that would cause an inflammatory response in the brain. If it's not, then there could be damage to the blood-brain barrier. Now, interestingly enough, if there's damage in the blood-brain barrier, there tends to always be damage to the gut barrier. And this is what we talked about in the last episode when we talked about digestion. I talked about this, like gut bacteria and how they work together, and we have this symbiotic relationship with the bacteria in our gut. And if you haven't had a chance to go listen to that episode, it might be beneficial for you to understand if you're having any of these like headaches, migraines, or in general pain in your body, because it could mean that there's some permeability or kind of openings in the gut that are allowing things out of the body that's damaging the blood-brain barrier. So the point of all of this is that our body is not just working in these little areas. And I use the analogy in my book that it's like taking a human body and turning it into a puzzle, and then giving puzzle pieces of yourself to different providers. So like if my feet are having a problem, I'm going to go specifically to a foot doctor. If it's my spine or my heart or my lungs, there's specific doctors for all of those things now. But the problem is that sometimes if we're having pain in an area, it's not actually being caused by that area. It's actually being caused by something else. So it's important to look at the body and see all of the different ways that it's working so that we can really get to the bottom of problems. So back to the migraines and the inflammation. Our brain and blood-brain barrier and the gut bacteria layer are all working together to keep inflammation down and to keep the body protected. And when we have inflammation in the brain, that's such a large indicator that there's other problems going on in the body that need to be addressed. And when we just take pain medication for the pain that's going on in that area, we actually stop the pain signal from happening. And while that gives you a lot of relief to not have a pain signal anymore, you're not feeling it anymore, it also blocks the body's ability to actually heal itself. So pain is not just for you to feel uncomfortable or to feel upset by. It's actually your body's response to say something is wrong. And that something is wrong message doesn't just go to you externally, it goes to your brain, and it tells your brain that there's an area in the body that needs to be healed, and that there's an area in the body that new cells need to come to, and there needs to be some type of process to fix whatever it is that's going on. But when we block that pain signal by taking like over-the-counter medications, drugs, like ibuprofen, Advil, Tylenol, Imitrex, things like that, it actually blocks that signal, so the brain doesn't know that there's still something going on. And inflammation is almost always, it is always a sign that there's a problem in that area. And that we know simply by like if you twisted your ankle and it gets swollen and hot, That's your body sending its first signal to say something is wrong and we need to fix it. And that's cells all, clustered up in that area trying to fix that problem. So when we have inflammation, it's often a marker that there's something going on in that area that needs to be addressed. But the traditional model is to just look at that one specific area and then fight the symptoms of that problem. So if it's migraines, we take pain medication, migraine medication. If it's gut pain, we take steroids to block inflammation. We take antacids to block the acid in our stomach, without realizing that if we do these things to kind of block these natural processes, we're actually blocking our body telling us, hey, something is wrong. And unfortunately, what happens, or what tends to happen when you block those responses, is your body will find another way to tell you that things are going on. And unfortunately for me, my symptoms started when I was a little kid. I was hypoglycemic. I was always going to the nurse's office. I always had digestional problems and inflammation in the gut, and I was always dealing with those kinds of problems. And nobody ever really looked at what the actual issue was. I just got diagnosed with, IBS and hypoglycemia, and they treated me with things like keep candy in your backpack and, here's these steroid medications to keep the inflammation down. There was really never any looking into what could actually be wrong with my body. Until I came back to that holistic approach and really looked at my digestive health is not good. My vitamin D levels are super low, so my bacteria might not be adjusting properly. And it wasn't until I made those connections that I really started to heal. And it took me 20 years to finally realize that my body wasn't this puzzle that was being asked to be taken apart and silenced. It was actually this really amazing process that was trying to warn me the whole time and say, hey, look at me, there's something going on under the surface, and we really needed to take a closer look. So for me, it was constantly being prescribed different medications for pain and then having new symptoms that came out that made me realize that this wasn't the process for me. So I started really researching into the holistic lifestyle and really started to understand that every part of our body works together to support the other part. It's so necessary for us to be taking care of the body as a whole rather than trying to just fix one area or silence an area. So if you're dealing with migraines, you could have serious food allergies that are creating inflammation that's crossing the blood-brain barrier, which is showing that there's some type of detriment there. And that's a much bigger issue, and also something that can easily be solved by changing your diet, adapting a lifestyle that's more suitable for you and your digestive health so that you can get rid of and not have these problems anymore, not even have to deal with the pain anymore. Which was only really supposed to be a signal in the first place to tell you hey, something is wrong. But instead it became this perpetuated cycle of okay, well, every 2 or 3 weeks this thing happens, and the only way I get rid of it is by taking this medication. We can actually stop that cycle because it's just a signal. It's just your body saying, hey, there's something going on, and this is my way of telling you. And for me, it got louder and louder and louder, and eventually it was screaming at me, and my hypoglycemia and things that maybe would have been a lot simpler to take care of when I was a kid turned into things like celiac disease and Hashimoto's disease because I never took care of the initial problem. Maybe I just had gluten allergies as a kid, or maybe I never really did well with sugar because I had taken antibiotics a few times and I had some dysbiosis. There are a lot of reasons why it could have gotten to the point where it got to. But the point was that every time I had a new problem, I went to the specialist for that area, took whatever they told me to take, and then the next problem would come up and I'd go to the next specialist. And what ended up happening is that by the time I was 23 years old, I was already on 4 or 5 different medications for totally different things. And none of those doctors really ever asked me what else I was doing. It was just, how can I help you get rid of this symptom right now? And as much as I appreciated not being in pain anymore, it got pretty frustrating that it got louder and louder and louder. So if we can start looking at the body now at the whole picture and thinking, even with something like heartburn, stomach acid actually shouldn't be something we're trying to silence. Stomach acid is so vitally important to breaking down food that if you don't have stomach acid, it can actually create a lot of problems in your lower digestive system. Again, like we talked about last episode in digestion, the bacteria in our gut can't break down large particles of food. It has to be broken down before it gets to that point. Otherwise, it just gets pushed out of the body basically whole. That's the problem we see with some beans and corn, that the body can't break it down at all. So it just comes out the way that it went in. And that actually creates a lot of pain when we're digesting food because it's just too large of particles and it can't be broken down. So the body ends up having to push it out. That stomach acid, that first line of breaking food down, if we have a problem with it, if we either have too much or too little, we end up taking antacids to block it, and it creates a neutral environment for our stomach. And neutral may sound nice, but neutral on the pH scale, so that's kind of like right in the middle. The pH is like 2 is acid that would burn you, and 11 is the most alkaline you could possibly be. Our stomach is supposed to be between a 2 and a 4. And when we take acid blockers, it actually makes our stomach on the pH level at about a 7, which is neutral. But in a neutral stomach acid environment, our body cannot break down the food the way that acid is supposed to break down food. So oftentimes when we end up getting heartburn and things like that, it's actually the opposite of what we think. We don't have too much acid in our gut. We have not enough acid. And so the body is trying to produce extra, and it ends up making you have a lot of pain. So doing something simple like adding a little bit of acid to your stomach before you eat meals. A popular way to do this now is by adding apple cider vinegar or taking a shot of apple cider vinegar before you eat. That vinegar, that acid in vinegar sitting in your stomach actually helps to increase your stomach acid in an appropriate way so you can break down that food properly. But we need to first understand that the acid is working for us and in our favor, and not necessarily working against us or trying to hurt us. It's just a little whisper. It's like well, I guess sometimes it can be a scream too if it's really painful when you're trying to sleep. But the body's just trying to give you a signal and say, hey, there's something going on in this area. And when we take any kind of block to stop that pain or to stop that process, then again, the body doesn't know how to repair itself, and it doesn't know that it needs help in that area because we've stopped the response. So it's important to look at the whole picture. If you're having any of these issues, migraines, heartburn, digestive issues, really anything, hormone issues, to look at the whole picture. Something interesting that I've found out, not recently, but throughout my research of hormones, because with Hashimoto's disease, it actually makes a lot of issues for hormone regulation. And what I found is that without proper minerals, your hormones can't be produced properly. So things like magnesium and zinc and selenium actually really help your body to produce the hormones that it needs. And without those things, you can't have normal balanced hormones. So if you're going to the doctor because you have low hormones or high hormones, too much estrogen, not enough progesterone, not enough testosterone, those kind of things, it could be not that your body isn't producing them or capable of producing them, but it doesn't have all the tools that it needs. So simply adding things like your minerals in can help with your endocrine system or your hormone system. But the only way we know that is by looking at the body as a whole picture. And I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but we can't just look at the hormones when there are hormone problems. We have to look at all the building blocks it takes to get to that place so that we can really make an educated decision on how to get better and how to heal, instead of having our body in this cycle of pain medication, new pain medication, symptom relief, new symptom. And that's unfortunately the pattern that we get into. We get diagnosed with high blood pressure, and then we take the blood pressure medication, which messes with our cholesterol. So we take cholesterol medication, which messes with our sodium levels. So we have to go on a low sodium diet. There's all these these chain of events that get triggered, that eventually you get more and more taken away from you, and more of your freedoms taken away, and more side effects that aren't necessary to begin with. If you can look at the body and really see where the problems are coming from, and understand that pain in the body isn't necessarily something to be like crazy mad about. It could be just telling you that, hey, there's a problem that needs to be addressed. And you could actually have more than symptom relief. You could have healing and real success with looking at all of the things that could be involved. And that's how I found success with my own health and my own healing, was just by looking at the big picture instead of chopping myself up into these little pieces and giving each doctor a little part of me. I found doctors who were willing to look at the whole thing and ask me the whole story. And I remember asking doctors, specialists, things like if different pain in different areas could be related to like my thyroid or my celiac disease. And they would tell me like, no, you have to go ask that kind of doctor, or have to go ask your, internal medicine doctor or your general practitioner doctor. They wouldn't even answer the questions about the other systems in the body, because that's just not what they're trained to do. So it's important to find somebody that will look at the whole picture and will look at everything that could be involved, because it could be a totally simple fix rather than masking the actual pain symptom itself. What a heavy topic. I really hope you guys got something good out of this today, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Thank you for spending your tea time with us. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Living well and shining on what you're about. Eating well is loving from the inside out. So take the time to love yourself. Take your plans off of the shelf. 'Cause for all you love, with all that you do, don't forget to love you too.